Okay, super. So, hi everyone. Today, I want to give an overview of the Open Intents framework, which was recently launched. And as we mentioned before, it was an initiative led by the Ethereum Foundation, Bootnode, and Hyperlane, and supported by the wider ecosystem. And yeah, today will be like a short overview. And after my workshop, Bootnode will be continuing more deep dive into the framework itself as well. So before we even get to that, my name is Eda, and I'm a developer advocate at Hyperlane. To give a quick intro to Hyperlane is that we are building a permissionless infrastructure for cross-chain messaging. Essentially, what this means is that we build the tools to for different environments to talk to each other. And today I'm going to be talking about the Open Intents framework, which was an initiative which we participated in as well. And it's actually going to be my first time presenting it, so I hope it will go well. And don't worry if you don't know about intents, you probably heard about them, but it doesn't require any prior knowledge. So we're going to be covering everything from the ground level. So hopefully, even if if you have some background knowledge, it will be some kind of good refresher. But even if you don't, that's completely okay. I'm gonna move over here to this side. But yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about what are intents, why you should pay attention, and then give a quick introduction to the Open Intents framework. We'll be talking about the key components. I'm not going to dive deep into them because after this workshop, Bootnode will be continuing and they'll be diving a bit more deeper. And then lastly, we'll kind of talk about looking ahead, like what's after intents, what this open building in the open and modular infrastructure enables. So we'll be talking about that. Okay, perfect. And yeah, as I mentioned, you probably heard about intents at some point. You probably read them on Twitter. But I feel like they've been a buzzword. So many people have heard of it, but not many people know of it. So I hope to cover them from ground level. I honestly have been hearing about them for the past, I guess, few years. But only until recently was the time, like I guess like 5, 6 months ago when I was more interested in how cross-chain bridging and messaging happens is when I actually got into them. So no worries at all if you are hearing it for the first time or if you know of it before. And okay, so what are intents and why should you care? Before we even get to intents, I think it's important to like just take a step back and see where we are today and how we got to where we are and why intents even matter. So if we look back on scaling Ethereum, like Ethereum started out as a great project. It was one chain. You could interact on its, on a single wallet, interact with a single chain. But then what happened that it became it was unable to handle the load. So it was very hard for even transactions to be processed. It would take ages. It would cost a lot of money to even send a single transaction. And then Vitalik introduced the rollup-centric roadmap 5 years ago at this point. And so with that, what happened was that we saw the rise of all these different L2s, like Optimism, Arbitrum, ZK Sync, etc. So there was like a boost of innovation and so many like different environments popped up, which actually made Ethereum scalable. So that was great. Like the rollup-centric roadmap helped us to scale Ethereum. But at the same time, what this bought in the end was that it made Ethereum very fragmented. So when we look today, this is like a screenshot from L2 Beats. You can see there are many L2 environments like Arbitrum Base, Optimism, Starknet, you name them. There are different environments. And even beyond Ethereum, there's also all these different L1 environments as well. So it was great progress that we went from, Ethereum being a single chain and then being too congested and then having introduced the rollup-centric roadmap, that being successful, Ethereum finally being scalable, but then now Ethereum is fragmented. So now we have like a new problem to kind of address is how do we solve this fragmentation problem? How do we make Ethereum feel like a single chain again? And today, when you want to transact on Ethereum, you kind of see like all these blurry screens. You probably might, might not even be using these wallets, but you have your wallet of your choice, but you have all these different network settings, like 7 networks connected to the single app. So it's definitely not easy, even as someone who's been in this ecosystem for quite a while. I wasn't here when Ethereum was usable as a single chain, but I have been here for quite a while for the past 3 years. And it's not easy still to kind of, constantly change networks, be like, oh, okay, this transaction was on Ethereum. I actually need to change to base mainnet, or I need to change here. I need to send my funds from here. So it's definitely not easy to transact on Ethereum today. And yeah, this is kind of the point we're at right now, is that we scaled Ethereum to a point, it's very fragmented. It's just does not feel like a single chain. And what we want to do with all these different initiatives is that the goal is to make Ethereum feel like a single chain again. So you want like a single wallet, ideally, you want like a single interface, you want to just transact, and you want to be able to send money from chain, like from not even chain, but from person A to person B. So this would just make your life easier and be the Ethereum that you want, that scales and actually like is the financial layer of transactions or DeFi or any kind of um, financial instruments. And yeah, so given that the goal is to make Ethereum feel like a single chain again, there are many initiatives for this. There's different stuff that need to be happen, such as the account abstraction is one of them, and then there needs to be like some kind of wallets infrastructure that makes everything happen in a single wallet. But then there also needs to be very easy token bridging. So you want to easily send tokens from chain A to chain B. So like when we look here from like Optimism to like another to Polygon or to Scroll or to ZK Sync, you want to like easily send your assets from one chain to another. And this shouldn't feel like very hard where you go, where you bridge your assets, where it takes a long time. So yes, bridging solutions exist and they work. But the problem there is they're mostly like slow. And actually, yeah, I think I'm talking faster than my slides. But basically, what we need is we need fast and seamless interop to get to where we want, which is like to make Ethereum feel like a single chain again. And that's exactly where intents come in. So at the core, like intents kind of change the way the transactions work. And I kind of want to give an overview here is what I just, when I explain how transactions actually work, is in the current infrastructure, when you look at token bridging or when you look at transacting between chains, is that what happens is that you need to figure out a way to get from point A to point B. And you have to specify every instruction on the way. So let's say you want to send tokens from chain A to chain B, from Optimism to Arbitrum. What happens is that you first deposit your funds, you wait for the funds to arrive. So you wait for the finality over there. And then once that funds arrive to the next, is then you can send the message. So you have to wait for that time. And that kind of introduces like an extra, how can I say, like an extra wait period, which most people don't really want to wait that long to make like a single transfer transaction. So this is kind of the problem with most of the cross-chain transactions today, is that yeah, like they're a good way, you might not love like some of the different assumptions, but they basically kind of make you wait for the finality. And that's exactly where intents kind of shine. Is now instead of users manually defining, hey, like this is exactly the steps. Now you have to wait for the funds to arrive here. Putting that aside, the new way which intents work is that intents allow you to declare what you want. So intent, you can say, hey, I want to send my funds from A to B, instead of saying, hey, like exactly this is the amount of funds, this is the call data, this is all the instructions you need, send it from here to here. Now what you say is that, hey, I just want to send my funds from A to B, and I'm going to rely on off-chain specialized actors called solvers to do this for me. So that's kind of how intents change and how the transactions are today, versus what kind of the innovation that Intrans produced. So for example, with intents is that I think this is like a kind of nice overview, is that you want to swap 100 USDC from base to Arbitrum. And instead of, as I mentioned, like specifying the exact instructions, the solver, you can think of the solver as like there's like a marketplace of solvers. So you kind of broadcast the transaction, and then the solvers compete to kind of take that transaction, and which is the specialized off-chain agent. And they kind of take all the risk and the routing and settlement. So you don't have to worry about that wait time for that finality to arrive. So then you can send the next message. So this way, you kind of get like way fast interop. So you don't need to wait until the finality. You don't need to wait for all the processing. But now you can basically do it in under a few seconds. And yeah, hopefully this kind of gives you a small overview of intents. And yeah, I like this description here. It basically, the shift represents a move to a declarative model. So now the user can specify what they want instead of where they had to manually define how to execute every step. So yeah, so with the shift to intent, now you can basically say, hey, I want to like move 100 USDC from base to to base, from base to Arbitrum, and I'm giving all this responsibility to the solver. I just want to do this. And when you look at most apps, that's actually, or users don't really care if like, hey, like this is the call data, this is like which path I want to take. Like the user just wants like 100 USDC on from instead of on base, they want it on Arbitrum. So yeah, that's basically how users define it. So this makes the life of every party involved a lot easier and offloads a lot of the responsibility. I've been saving my voice for this presentation, so hopefully it's going okay. But now I kind of want to talk about building intent-based apps. Okay, so intents seem cool, right? Like they seem like they solve a lot of the problems we have with, cross-chain messaging. But why haven't we gotten there if intents have already been a thing for the past few years? Why aren't we seeing like so many intent-based apps? Like, yeah, there are like a few. There are like intent-based protocols and apps and stuff like that, but it's still not widely adopted. Because, well, building intent-based apps is quite hard. Um, when you want to build when you want to build an intent-based application and when you're a new chain, that creates quite a lot of problems for you. Well, not problem, but let's say roadblocks. Like you have to either partner with an existing intent protocol, so you have to reach out to them. This requires like custom integrations, technical research, BD negotiations to get your chain supported. And this might be quite hard if you're not like a larger chain. And then the second part is to build your own solver infrastructure, which also requires quite a lot of like extra technical work. And yeah, that's kind of the case when you want to build like an intent-based app today. Like if you're a big chain, you probably have a higher chance of partnering with an existing intent protocol like a cross. But if you're a small chain, this doesn't really like apply to you. So you need to find kind of like a new solution to be, okay, like I like this intent thing, but how can I actually put it to practice, right? Like I don't want it to just be like a high level concept which only some chains kind of use. And yeah, this is kind of the way like I like to describe the view on intents today is that intents are here to solve quite a lot of the fragmentation issues with Ethereum, and they offer a fast and seamless interop. However, in the state of which we are today, buildings with intents are hard. And well, if we have to be honest with each other, if intents are going to scale, we do need like common standards and an open and modular framework. We can't just be like, okay, like only big chains can do this, or only like, only you can do this with certain BD negotiations or something like that. That's not like a scalable way to move forward. And that is exactly where the open intents framework comes in. So I think it's also worth mentioning, even before moving to the open intent frameworks, there have been like quite a few like nice standards, like the ERC 7683, which was developed by Across and Uniswap, which is the ERC, which defines how the intents order should be made. So it kind of defines the transaction of what you need to add to make an intent transaction. So there are like common standards, but there is one thing to like define a standard, but also to build like a framework around it, which makes it easier to adopt. Because there's, yeah, like I don't want to dismiss the efforts that have been gone before building the open intent framework. So I think it's worth mentioning that there have been like such ERCs and work put into do that. So given that, now I kind of want to introduce the open intents framework. Okay, so enter open intents framework. The open intents framework. And yeah, you might have seen this image on Twitter or on one of the I don't know blogs you read recently. But it was recently launched, and it's led by the Ethereum Foundation, Hyperlane, and Bootnode, and supported by many ecosystems and projects in the Ethereum ecosystem. And basically, yeah, as you can see, intents for everyone with everyone. So it's a collaborative effort. And the goal is to build like an open and modular framework to making building intent-based applications easier. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the Open Intents framework is an open source and modular framework, and the goal is to build and deploy intent-based applications easy. Now, um, what we saw and with the need to build open intents framework is that, when you want to build your own intent-based application, most people had to like kind of build a lot of the infrastructure from start. And they kind of, there was a lot of teams building their own infrastructure. But when you look at it, building the same thing, it kind of makes sense to like have certain modular building blocks that people can use instead of having to start from zero all the time. So yeah, of course, it's important to customize. So I'm not saying like these are like, hey, like building blocks, which you cannot edit, but they're very customizable building blocks, which you can customize according to your needs. So this way, instead of every project building their own kind of infrastructure, they can tap into to these pre-built tools and customize it according to their needs. Um, and that's kind of the goal of the Open Intents framework. And as I mentioned, it's created as a public good led by contributors from Ethereum Foundation, Hyperlane, Bootnode, and with support from the wider Ethereum ecosystem. This was a cool tweet. This was quite a cool tweet, which I saw quite recently. Someone posted that they had the chance to test the Open Intents framework and that it took less than 5 seconds to bridge 10 USDC from base to Arbitrum. It's a huge step towards a multi-chain future and making Ethereum feel like a single network. So yeah, I thought this was like a really cool representation. I might have used the exact same words, so it was not my words, and I love to put this here because I think it really represents what I also think. But yeah, as the whole goal is to make like Ethereum feel like a single network again, I think that the Open Intents framework are really a big step in getting there. So I do want to talk about the key components. I'm not going to dive deep here. I know I'm also almost on time, but because also like Bootnode will be covering it in depth just right after me. But I just kind of want to mention to make it a bit more concrete in your heads, because I mentioned like, Open Intents framework is like, okay, this framework which has pre-built components, but what exactly are there? Like, is there actually like some code which I can take for me to use? And the answer is yes. So with the Open Intents framework, what we try to do is that, okay, instead of giving you just the standard, let's give you like some kind of code, like some kind of written framework, which you can directly take, kind of customize, add your logo, add your own customization settings and all that, and go ahead and start using it. So basically what the framework has is it's made of 3 different key components. And the first is the composable smart contracts. It uses a base 7683, which is the ERC developed by Uniswap and Across as a base contract, which can be extended. It has the second component is the open source solver implementation. And the third component is the UI template, which is very customizable, which you can kind of take and directly start using. Because the UI work does introduce quite a lot of extra work. So all these 3 building blocks are available to you, and they're all customizable. They're all like base building blocks, which you can add onto. And as I mentioned, Bootnode will cover this section in detail. So I'm going to be leaving the rest of the explanation to them, which will be right after me. And the how to start building section, this is again up next with Bootnode. So looking ahead, so I'm almost coming to the end here, but basically I just want to give a shout out to all the work which has been doing to scale intents with open and modular infrastructure. So the Open Intents framework is part of like a larger effort of all these different teams working together. So basically all the goal here is to make Ethereum feel like a single chain again. And with standards like the ERC 7683, the solver coordination efforts by Kahani and Uniswap's The Combat, and other like liquidity solutions, better user interfaces, reference solving is, yeah, kind of efforts towards making Ethereum, again, toward not just Ethereum, but basically the goal here is to make intents more widespread and easy to use. And yeah, there are like quite a few efforts. Hopefully the Open Intent framework will yeah, will be a good starting point for most people building intent-based applications. You can scan the QR codes or go to the website openintents.xyz to find the details and to read more about it. You can directly start building with intents. Hopefully, this was like a nice and short overview. I think my voice just lasted enough to make the presentation. And yeah, if you have any questions, happy to answer them. I highly suggest to head over to the openintents.xyz website to kind of check out what we have over there. And yeah, this was kind of my presentation. Again, happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Hey, thank you so much. I just popped a little question that we did have. And I know that you did obviously reference 7683, but someone was asking for maybe a little bit more, maybe clarity on the difference between using the, OIF and the ERC.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great question. So basically, the OIF does use the base 7683 contract. And the difference here is that the ERC specifies a common standard to make intent orders. But the difference between the OIF is that the OIF provides the other components as well. So that it doesn't only specify the common standard to create an intent, but basically it gives you also the solver implementation and the UI. So then it gives you like some other piece of code which you can directly start building the application instead of saying, hey, like this is the standard and you can start using it. That's kind of the way I like to explain it. Hopefully that kind of provides the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have, if your voice can last, one other question that I'll pop up there. Are there any cons of intents in terms of security?
Yeah, I think my voice can last one more question.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So the cons of intents in terms of security. So the thing with Open Intents framework is that you can basically specify your security constraints as well. So you can say like, hey, I want to use this for security. I want to add custom security implementations. Is that it uses kind of like a modular security infrastructure. The base implementation uses a Hyperlane ISM, which is the Hyperlane intersecurity model. But you basically have the option to customize it according to your needs. So again, it's really up to you on to add like the security which you require. And I think that's pretty cool because it kind of gives it to the developer to specify what kind of requirements they want.
Awesome. All right.
That's great. Was a very nice session explaining things like the motivation behind from even like the components and things to be considering when looking the open intents. Thank you so much for the session. I hope your voice gets better. And I think we can continue the session with a part 2 that is with
Yes.
Lissandro from Bootnotes. Maybe you want to bring him on the stage with?